The Cry of Gulls. In Madruga, last season, the Grendel marked the end of a 2-year peace treaty by sending an overwhelming force against Madruga. They shattered the Salt Guard and overran the defences of the prosperous heart of the Brass Coast, and engaged in daily rampant looting. They then withdrew and allowed their Nemorian allies to fire the city of Sails. It is a fortunate mercy that there were agents of the Prince with 1,000 foes in the city, working to ensure that as many people as possible escaped the murderous vengeance of the Assaveans. The city itself was by no means as lucky. The fire burned a wide swathe of destruction through the centre of what was once the most glorious, colourful city in the Empire. Few structures escaped unscathed, even some of the stone buildings are cracked from the heat, or from spitefully aimed catapult shots from the Assavean warships. Their terrible deed done, the orcs of the Broken Shore and their western allies rampaged across the coast of Madruga. They conquered free landing. So far, the ancient town of ATTRIBUTIONS survives the malice of the Assaveans, but how safe its future may be is still unclear. They conquered Lightsea, but the bustling port of Khazar transformed into a Grendel staging post. They raided along the coast of the Kavos Sound. Kavos itself has evaded their grasp. They even attacked the Lyceum, the centre of imperial magic study that sprawls across the island in the bay near Sirach. Here also they were turned back. During the winter solstice, imperial heroes managed to use a sentinel gate to reach the island. Magic wards were raised. Those wards would surround the island in impenetrable fog and darkness, making it impossible for the Grendel to complete their raid, protecting the library, the staff, the students, and the visiting professors from the Commonwealth. As long as the wards lasted until the start of the winter solstice, 386 YE, the island is safe. Safe, but isolated. The same wards that kept the Grendel raiders at bay prevent Imperial rescue reaching its shores. But the price of losing access to the Lyceum, for a time, is nothing compared to the risk of the bulk of Imperial lore and the proprietary research of nearly 4 centuries of Imperial magic falling into the hands of the Grendel magicians. The Darkened Beacon. Whilst they were defending the Lyceum, the Grendel there were not the only raiders guided by a grim purpose. Also during the winter solstice, the Grendel and their allies destroyed the Shining Pillar. The massive white and gold tower was one of the most prominent landmarks in the Empire, and adopted by many of the freeborn sailors as a symbol of the Brass Coast as a whole. Tired mariners on ships travelling to the far corners of the known world knew that when they could see the beacon of the Shining Pillar, they were almost home. It was a symbol of safety, of hearth and family, of pride and prosperity. Now the white granite tower is no more, the mithril mirrors broken, the beacon watch slaughtered, or so it was believed in the weeks that followed the solstice. Any Imperial ship captain in the western bay of Khazar can confirm the Shining Pillar is gone. The bravest report that servants of the Tempest Mole hunt the seas around Atalar and Khazar in worrying numbers. It seems the Mistress of Rex found enough victims to state her hunger after all. Something new has risen in place of the Shining Pillar, a maelstrom of chaos and destruction and that births monsters to ravage the Brass Coast, and perhaps even further afield. The Corsairs and freeborn ship captains grieve, but they have a duty to perform. The freeborn assembly have urged them to put aside thoughts of vengeance for a grievous injury done to them by the Assaveans and the Grendel, for the destruction of Madruga, and instead strive to protect trade vessels passing through the bay waters to the League, Highguard and Urizen. Continuing games. The Spider's Dream is still damaged from the treacherous raid on the Sarkum last year. Any armies wishing to pass between Madruga and either Tasso or Sarvus must navigate the ruined bridge and the dangerous river crossing as best they can, risking delays and worse. It will be just as difficult to move back across into the League should the army fighting in the territory need to retreat north rather than into Karaman to the west. Yet considerations of risk do not give the Imperial generals cause. Shortly after the winter solstice, when the freeborn people, still uncertain of what their future holds, with the Grendel continuing to raid and pillage and march their armies north into Kavos Sounds, the armies of the Empire reached Madruga. The fire of the south crossed the Spider's Dream, and even as the first warriors' feet touched the southern banks, they forming up to march south. From Brega's land come the Bounders, the Drakes, and the stone reeds of the Marchers. They sweep down through Mornwall, through Jotun-threatened Karaman, and join the freeborn in the south of Turus. As the 4 armies prepared to go south, to where the Grendel armies are advancing, they are all joined by a 5th, The Burning Falcons have taken the shortest route possible from Segura, dodging the Orc armies in Jade Range, and have erupted into the Kavos Sounds, even as the main Imperial forces hurl itself against the Grendel. The two forces could not be enacting more diametrically opposed strategies here. Certainly suspecting the Empire would not allow their terrible deeds to go unanswered, the bulk of the Grendel army still in Madruga, the Storm Sharks and the Iron Gulls, press cautiously into the Kavos Sounds from Lightsea. They clearly expect resistance, and they receive it in abundance as the 5 Imperial armies seek to overwhelm them, drive them back and push them back into Feroz, or into the sea. Finally, there are the Black Eels. They seem less concerned with conquering the Brass Coast, with bringing Kavos Sounds and thus the whole of Madruga within Grendel concern, but those who fight under the banner, the main concern appears to be seizing as much wealth from the freeborn as possible. If it is valuable and not nailed down, the Black Eels will steal it, and if it is nailed down and looks like it would fetch a good price, they'll come back with crowbars. If there is a saving grace, it is that a single-minded focus on the pillage means that they retreat from any significant Imperial military presence, but that offers little comfort to the freeborn families trying to defend their homes or flee east or north with some fraction of their prosperity still intact. As always with Orcs of Attar, their armies receive crucial support from the sea. 3 navies, more than 100 ships, with sails of blue, green and yellow, seek to secure coastal towns and reinforce the armies with their mariners. The main target appears to be the town of Kavos, the only remaining jewel of the Brass Coast shores that have not yet been plundered. A prize that, should they claim it, will in some way mark the absolute defeat of the freeborn people. Both sides have magical support. The Drakes fight with supernatural clarity, and so do some of the Grendel. Both sides have their allies, mercenaries, independent captains fighting alongside their armies and navies. The bulk of the Imperial captains fight with the Burning Falcons, and a network of autumn magic grants them a supernatural ability to work together with a freeborn army. The freeborn forces include what is first appeared to be a small force of Assaveans, to the surprise of many. They arrive as the Burning Falcons reach Torres, perhaps 90 young folk in unfamiliar armour with peculiar weapons. They angrily deny any suggestion they have common cause with the humans fighting alongside the Grendel. Representatives of the little enclave in Trazador, they come to offer their support to the freeborn armies. They are weak warriors, unused to discipline and lack the endurance of trained soldiers. They more than make up for it with their knowledge of crafting, with a remarkable facility for repairing weapons and armour, or bringing unexpected magic items. Half of them do not even speak Imperial, but they want to fight. Partially inspired by a serious gift given to them by Imperial citizens to help defend their new home, mostly by the knowledge that if the Grendel take Torres, the Orcs will not protect it from the Nemorans. The Ashen Knights of the Bound King who fight with the fire of the South mock these useful enthusiasts as they face and encourage their freeborn allies to turn them away. The servants of Tharim have plenty of other things to occupy their attention in the fight against the Grendel. However, they soon lose interest. They slaughter orcs and mercenaries alike with equal glee. They offer their deaths to the Dark Monarch and urge those who fight alongside them to indulge in their darkest passion, to take vengeance against the orcs who have dealt them so many blows over the years, to unleash their fury against the hateful Assaveans, against all those who would take their homes from them. For their part, the Grendel field plenty of mercenaries, both orc and human, especially among the Iron Gulls, and of course, there are the 3 great Assavean warships, Ballow's Grace, Leaping Bull, and Wind Tamer, and their attending vessels. The great Leathevans of the sea supporting the Tempest as they move to the Kavos Sounds. But then, unexpectedly, they peel away. Imperial scouts report that the ships are sailing south and east, and while a few of the Grendel vessels pursue them, they soon turn back. Are they on a different mission? Another terrible errand of destruction? What is there left for them to destroy? Notably their absence, servants of Sakara, while they may have been gathered at the Shining Pillar, while they may be eager for slaughter and mayhem, it appears they have no stomach for the back and forth of strategic battle. Calvos. The first big battle of the campaign to regain Madruga takes place at Kavos. The Grendel Armada and the bulk of their forces attack along the coast to take the prosperous town. It's notable that even as the first Grendel ships disgorge their cargo of mariners onto the Calvos docks, they give the Cimmery of Zemerus a wide berth. No siege weapons are employed against the docks near the Kraken's Bane and the House of Guerrera. There is no suggestion that orcs are here to burn. They're here to conquer. Imperial forces have pushed themselves to reach Calvos in head of the Grendel. They barely make it in time. Fighting erupts across the town and quickly spreads to the vineyards and orangeries. The Black Eels arrive late, and rather than engage in Imperial forces, they seek to tear apart the warehouses, the wineries and the storehouses. Their fellow orcs look with envious eyes as their allies line their own pockets and plunder and fight, only when engaging directly with the Empire. The Fire of the South and the Burning Falcons blaze with anger as they fight the Grendel. Many of the soldiers in those two armies came from Calvos, and somewhere like it. Some are almost consumed by their fury, egged on by the Knights of Tharim, and the Grendel cannot hope to stand against it. No less terrible is the wrath of the Marchers, 3 armies united by the will to drive the orcs from freeborn soil, inspired by their own recent victories of the orcs over the orcs to the west and over the signs of the cold sun. They liberated Brega's land, and now they'll liberate Madruga, or die trying. When the Grendel finally break, when their soldiers and mariners retreat south along the coast or east into the bay, silence falls over Calvos, broken only by the cries of the wounded and the dying, by the weeping of the survivors, by the eager skirring calling of the gulls. Thousands of soldiers fallen in battle, orcs and humans alike, scattered in the streets and floating in the waters of the docks. The town still stands, though, but what has been broken cannot be mended. The people are still free of the Grendel, yet the victory is sour. So many dead. Too many dead. That night, drawn by the bloodshed, the servants of Maelstrom were spotted for the first time. A few hundred heralds, shark-like and strange beasts, emerge from the waters without warning. They're crazed, driven by an uncontrollable bloodlust, attacking without care or caution. They are quickly dealt with, but those who face their attack are left shaken. Even those who have faced heralds of the Queen of Rex before say these creatures, these terrible bloodthirsty monsters, are different than they have ever seen before. Lightsea and Khazar. There is little to no time to mourn and less time to worry about the servants of Siaka. A token garrison is left at Calvos to protect it as the people begin to rebuild, to burn the bodies of the fallen and the funeral rites of the freeborn dictate, and to see the dead marchers planted beneath the orange trees or return to their homeland. The Imperial armies are on the move again, returning to the original goal, the end of the Grendel hold on Madruga. Lightsea is densely settled for the Brass Coast, and in happier times, well known across the Empire for friendliness of its Pardors. Under the Grendel, it's a land of chaos and death. Towns conquered and looted, all resistance crushed beneath the boot of the orcs of Attar. Their attack on Calvos sounds defeated. The Grendel force the fight to keep the grip on Lightsea. Armies clash across the grasslands, and while the Empire is not victorious in every battle, they slowly but surely win the war. The orcs are pushed south and east again. Disciplined retreat, but one that is clearly part of a strategy to preserving orc lives rather than making the liberators pay for every inch of land. They fall back towards their base of Khazar, and as they get closer to the sea, they fight more furiously. They receive reinforcements from the Armada, morals strengthened by supplies or healing potions, and the more mundane materials by the aid of the Grendel mariners. The second great battle of the campaign takes place a month or so before the spring equinox, and it's perhaps inevitable that it takes place in Khazar. The bustling port of white towers and stained glass is renowned for its beauty, but now it's a garrison town, a militarised camp for the Grendel forces charged with conquering the rest of Madruga. They've already begun to transform the place. Barracks and palisades are being erected, the poor folk of the town pressed into labour or defacing their own homes in the name of strengthening it against the threat of Imperial counterattack. While they've fallen back before the Imperial armies, here the Grendel make a stand. They will not surrender Khazar without a fight, and the fighting is terrible indeed. The Grendel are dug in here like ticks, and for some time it looks as if the Imperial soldiers will have to choose between defeating their foes or leaving part of Khazar intact. It's notable that the Asavean allies, the 3 great warships, are back, and while they're clearly not allowed to bombard the town itself, they are free to launch withering missiles against Imperial forces outside of the town to the north and the south. Some of the most vicious fighting takes place around the Pardor of the Salt and Sand, where a parade of Grendel battle magics have occupied the markets and lodgings and gathered and plundered the wealth of the Hakima of Lightsea. There are reports that Sky Mage Farrier, one of the Grendel Master's wizards, responsible for orchestrating the assault on the Elysium, is leading this group, and they provide invaluable magic support to the Grendel soldiers fighting to keep the town under Orc control. It isn't enough, not in the face of the freeborn fury of the Burning Falcons, but at the last Farrier and his followers unleash a terrible weapon. The sky above the Pardor of Salt and Sand seems to crack open in several places, allowing the light to flood through, paralysing the warriors fighting in the plaza. Only the fact that the light is indiscriminate in its target, blasting the minds of the Grendel as eagerly as it does the Imperials, prevents a terrible slaughter. By the time the light fades, Farrier and his allies escape the plaza, taking with them an unknown number of treasures seized from the Hakima who once gathered there. The fighting continues through most of the day, and by noon it's obvious the Grendel cannot hold the town. Their strategy is too careful, too conservative, too concentrated with holding on what they have conquered. Against the overwhelming ferocity of the Empire, they are forced to fall back once again, south again, towards the Siroc Plains, towards the ruined city of Sails, towards the border with Faraz. Some attempt to escape by sea, and those soldiers who pursued the retreating Orc warriors to the docks are witness to a horror sufficient to turn the stomachs of the most hardened corsair. The last 3 Grendel ships, 3 yellow-sailed ships of the Golden Winds, overrun with servants of Siaka, both on the deck and in the water, and also less familiar creatures, being described as living storms bound within a shroud of skin, whose touch hurls the sailors and soldiers trying to flee into the blood-dimmed waters for their fellows to feast on. Not just heralds either, but also a number of blood-soaked pirates with a terrible misshapen vessel of their own, tearing into the fleet of the Grendel and those Imperial soldiers who stray onto the docks with equal abandon. Something, to put it mildly, is not right. The heralds are no match for the armies, nor are there pirates that fight alongside them. Most refuse to flee, however. They must be killed, and killed hard, before they will stop trying to slaughter the people of Khazar. Another garrison left behind to protect Khazar. Are the Imperial armies being stretched too thin? More funerals, more weeping, questions without answers, and again, not enough time to worry. The pressures cannot be allowed to ease. The Grendel must be kept running, lest they're regrouping and relaunching a counterattack. Spring is coming, but the Grendel do not try to regroup, at least not to launch a counterattack. Their fighting quickly becomes a retreat as they pull back towards Siroc Plains. The Empire follows. More fighting, more clashes, more bodies. The final tally for the season of war will come in at a little over 2,500 marchers who will not see their homes again. Perhaps 1,500 freeborn who spilt their blood to free Madruga. The Grendel have paid almost as severe a price. Their more cautious strategy could only do so much. As the spring equinox draws near, the freeborn and the marchers have made minor inroads into the Siroc Plains, but the Grendel are still firmly in control. The territories of Madruga the Empire controls, Turres, Cavil Sound and Lightsea. The Grendel hold the Siroc Plains and Free Landing. Or rather, it's assumed they hold Free Landing. A handful of Grendel prisoners are interrogated, and they confess a story of treachery and murder. On the fall of the Shining Pillar, a terrible miscalculation of Asavean pirate fed screaming to the sharks. Of murder and bloodshed and the water of Free Landing turning against the Grendel Armada. Of the mistress of the Tempest Jade calling her followers to battle against everyone who dwells along the shore of the Bay of Khazar in the name of her terrible goddess. Partly confirmed, these reports come days before the spring equinox. A lone pirate ship, hull-bound in chains, hauls the bloated and gull-pecked bodies of both human and orc soldiers, approaches the dock of Khazar. It weighs anchor, and the scared, heavily armoured orc warriors come onto the docks. She doesn't draw her sabre, she just waits. The garrison stand ready to repel the raiders, but when it's clear they're not attacking, 2 captains, a marcher and a freeborn, come carefully down the quayside to find out what she wants. The air thunders with tension. The pirates aboard their dreadful ship throng to the railings silently. Whoever this orc woman is, she is no diplomat. She spits into the sea, a gob of snot and blood and spite. And a moment later the waters boil. 2 massive cauldron shark heralds rise out of the water and clamber onto the docks behind her, towering over the orc. They bring with them the stench of blood and terror, causing one of the Imperial officers to take a step back. The orc ignores them. "I have been sent to speak with you," she says, her voice rippled with content. "The High Priestess has a message for you, your rulers." She cocks her head slightly and waits to see if the Imperials recognise her name. The freeborn officer clearly does, a servant of the mad, eternal Siaka, and the architect of the Shining Pillar's downfall. Satisfied, the orc continues. "The Bay of Cattazar belongs to us. It has been sanctified with blood, and the High Priestess claims it as her domain, not for the Salt Lords, or for the people of Atalar, or the Broken Shore, but for our mistress, for the Queen of the Reefs, the devouring maelstrom, the thunder that roars, the blades of the sea, the goddess of the storm and slaughter. It is hers, it is ours, as it always should have been. From shore to shore it is ours, whether you are Imperial or Grendel, you cling to its borders only as our prey." They pull their lips back from their monstrous teeth and give voice to an awful booming bellow. It's echoed by a terrible cheer from the pirate ship. There is no opportunity for further discourse, as it seems the bloodthirsty pirates intend to launch a doomed attack against the entire garrison of Khazar. But at the last moment, the emissary turns on her heels and strides back up the gangplank. The ship loosens its sail and returns to where it came. The herald remains for a moment longer, looming on the docks, and then dive back into the water. Game information. Madruga. Mystic messages aside, the campaign in Madruga has resulted in victory, but at a terrible cost. The Marchers and Freeborn armies have driven the Grendel out of Lightsea and prevented them taking the Calva Sounds. The Orcs of the Broken Shore control Sorok Plains. It is not quite clear who controls the Free Landing, but whatever the garbled stories of the Grendel prisoners might say, it's not in Imperial hands. The Blight Heart, which was once the Great Grasses, remains under the control of whatever the heck controls Blight Heart. The Pardor of the Sultan Sand in Khazar is liberated, and the Hakama of the Sultan Sand is once again free to gather their fellows in Lightsea, to find out how much damage the Grendel have done. The Brass Coast armies are still in decline, as detailed in A Beacon of Smoke. They need one more prosperous coastal region to prevent this. Game information. No, seriously, what is going on? Further information about what is happening in the Bay of Cattazar will be given out in a Winds of Fortune. Participation. Fire of the South. A character who controlled a military unit and supported the Fire of the South, and only the Fire of the South this season, may choose to have accepted a boon from the Knights of the Bound King. The boon works as an enchantment, meaning it will be removed if you receive a different enchantment. Otherwise, it will last until the end of the spring equinox. Whilst it persists, it will allow you to make 2 uses of Unstoppable each day, as if you knew the skill without spending a hero point. The boon also brings with it a role-playing effect. You'll find it difficult to show mercy to your opponents. It feels good to execute fallen enemies on the battlefield, and easy to find excuses to do so. If someone flees or surrenders, you find it difficult not to continue to press your attack until they're dead. In social situations, you're likely to lash out at anyone who you think is threatening you or your friends, and will feel the urge to draw a weapon and then execute them. If your military unit supported Fire of the South, you'll need to email plot@profounddecisions.co.uk to have the boon assigned to your character.